Hi everybody, welcome to our lecture on emergent writing for preschool. And I just want you to know I'm using my son's gaming headset to record, and I feel like it's picking up the background noise. So if you hear children or dishes clinking or regular house noises, dog barking, I apologize. So just as we've talked about children needing to see themselves as readers, children also need to see themselves as writers. Even if we can't understand what they've written on paper, or if it just looks like a bunch of squiggles and lines and dots and scribbles, the fact is children are writing. They are understanding the purpose and value of writing and understand that what they write down has a message or a meaning. And there are many stages of writing. I know some of you have taken the art class already, and maybe you've studied Rhoda Kellogg's Stages of Artistic Development in Young Children, and this follows a really similar pattern to what Rhoda Kellogg had researched in her work studying children's artistic development around the world. But some argue that there are many, many more stages or phases of children's writing, and I've even heard one researcher claim to have identified 80 different stages of children's emergent writing. It really starts with scribbles, and toddlers love to smash markers. Have you seen that happen? I have. They smash the markers and break the tip. That's all part of a stage of writing. And you could see here on the left, the image looks like scribbles and maybe even some letter-like forms, but mostly squiggles, and that's a toddler's writing. But you can even think of something more primitive than that, maybe a 9-month-old lightly making one line on a paper with something. And I always tell parents that if a infant or older infant around 6 to 9 months old can hold an eating utensil, they can certainly hold a writing utensil. And then as children develop in their skill and their fine motor, they begin to separate writing and drawing and organize writing into lines, as you see on the right. And then by age 3, some children can distinguish writing from pictures and begin using pictures as a way to tell their story. And that's how they make meaning in print. And so when you see older toddlers and preschoolers drawing pictures and telling you, read my story, their picture is their story. That is their writing. And so encourage that to happen. They begin to recognize that people use marks to represent meaning, and it begins to show up again in their artwork. Pictures become more intentional and often have an entire story that surrounds one stick figure or one squiggle or one shape that maybe resembles a human. But those pictures are really, really important. All right, so we were going to do group time to talk more about development. Instead, what I'd like you to do is to maybe take your own notes in response to these 2 or 3 statements on the slide. So the first one was going to be discuss what you know about individual differences in children and think about physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. And I'm going to give you just a few hints here since we don't have the chance to talk about it in class. So for children, and I'm going to reference my brother specifically because he's a good example. For children who are developing atypically or have developmental delays or disabilities or identified orthopedic issues, sometimes writing development comes later because kids are working on other things. For example, my brother was born with clubbed feet, no heels, and had to have his legs broken and rotated outwards, and an orthopedic surgeon had to construct heels. And what I know and understand about a child's physical development is that children develop from the trunk out. So my brother spent a lot of time developing those core muscles, which led to developing those bigger leg muscles, upper arm muscles. And much later in his development, he began working on his fine motor. And I remember being about 4 years old, and he would have been 5, going to the occupational therapist with him as he would be working on his fine motor development. And I remember at 4, I know this is crazy, at 4, I had much more refined fine motor skills than he did, but he was spending so much more time focusing on relearning how to walk and run, that he was busy. And so he was preoccupied with other skills and development, that he wasn't ready for all the writing and fine motor. And sometimes you see the same thing in children who are developing language skills, who maybe seem like they have a delay in social and emotional skills. So those kids are developing language skills, and sometimes if they can't articulate themselves, they get frustrated, and that can impact their social and emotional development. So just know that all development impacts other development and learning. And then I was going to have you describe how you think that individual differences influence children's development in writing, and then what other circumstances or opportunities need to be present for children to become writers. So maybe jot some things down. What do you think? What circumstances or opportunities need to be present for children to become writers? All right. Next, in phase 2 of writing development, children begin to write their own names. It's usually the first name or the first word that children learn to read and write. It's very important to them. They may begin to write mock words and use detailed pictures. 3 and 4-year-old children who have been exposed to writing in various ways become very interested in the words other than their names. And sometimes kids really enjoy family members' names, or their friends in their neighborhood, or maybe they want to use common words that they hear all the time around the house or at school, but they become really attached to words and ideas that they hear often, and they might try to write them down. And so if you were going to have a writing center, it might be good to have a list of common words that children are really excited about, names of children, names of family, just so that they're seeing it in print and they have the opportunity to copy it. So here are some examples of names and mock words. And you can see on the left, you can see some things that resemble letters, and then some things that are clearly letters. There's a shape that looks like an E, a D, an L that has an extra line that almost looks like it could have been an E. There's a backwards P, or maybe it's a 9, I don't know, and a G and a backwards C. And then on the right, some letter-like shapes and some drawings. Next, children move on to letter strings. And this particular letter string has numbers embedded in it too. It can be really tricky for some kids to distinguish between letters and numbers. But usually kids learn, well, depending on their experience and exposure, learn numerals before they learn graphemes. So graphemes are the written letter shape. Just because numerals are much more concrete and tangible than a letter sound. A letter sound has a letter shape has an abstract letter sound, where a numeral has a very identifiable quantity. And so some kids figure that out pretty quick and can distinguish between letters and numbers easily, while some children get the two all kinds of mixed up. And it's really, really typical. So if that's happening and you see it happening, it's okay. It's a sign that you need to provide more opportunities for children to distinguish between the two. And then pictures are beginning to become more detailed. On this picture, you can see there's a lot going on. There's some squiggles that could be writing. It could be smoke in the air. It could be clouds. I have no idea. But you could tell this child definitely had a story to tell in their picture. They use pictures to tell about events or situations, or really just sometimes to depict a single object. And so today I was sitting down with my little girl, and she was drawing just a picture of me and a picture of her, and she was writing some words underneath, and she said, "This is me, this is you, and we're holding hands." And the holding hands part was really just a line drawn between the two of us, but that was her way of depicting what she had in her mind. And so it's important to have conversations with children about what they draw and write, because you get them to vocalize or verbalize, or just even if they're not able to vocalize or verbalize, to think about what they're drawing and writing. All right, so phase 3, the writing and drawing, really come into full bloom. So 4 and 5-year-old children are writing really for a variety of purposes, and should have the opportunity to write for a variety of purposes. It may look like journals, it may look like notes that they write to each other, or maybe notes that they write to friends or family, or maybe they're writing stories. but their writing begins to look more conventional. And as we modeled in class a while ago, sometimes it's labeling pictures and putting initial sounds to specific drawings in a particular picture, but it becomes more conventional, more purposeful. And they begin to understand why specific letters are selected to spell different words. So this is, again, probably looks really familiar. It kind of follows Rhoda Kellogg's stages of artistic development, but this is for specifically writing. And this just shows 12 different stages of writing, from scribbles all the way to whole sentences. So older preschoolers really begin to combine their strategies for writing. And sometimes they use early invented spelling. So early invented spelling just means that they're using some of the sounds and words that they hear. And our English language is so tricky because we have dun dun dun, silent sounds and words that you don't hear. And so they're often left out in invented spelling. And I've heard invented spelling called a couple of different things: magical spelling, invented spelling, practice spelling. But for kids, it's just spelling. And to be honest, it's conventional because they're writing what they hear. It's not till later that you really need to worry about conventions of our language and spelling. As long as they're practicing and writing down sounds that they hear in words, that's the best practice of all. Oh, you just talked about invented spelling. So it's also called phoneme-based spelling. It's just directly related to emergent reading. And we actually modeled a shared writing time earlier in the quarter when I wrote or drew a picture of camping. And that's what a shared writing time is. So you might remember that I thought out loud about what I was going to draw, and then I drew my image. And as I was drawing, I was talking about everything that I was doing. Once my picture was done, I labeled the picture. So I think I labeled tree, dog, tent, fire, really easy to sound out words in my picture. And then below my picture, I wrote my story. And I think I wrote a simple sentence like, I like to go camping. I take my dog when I go camping. But modeled writing is just that. You're practicing and showing what you know with children before you send them off to do it on their own. All right, so learning to form letters. This is where I get a little bee in my bonnet, and I might get a little rushed here because I'm running out of time on my pro recorder, but let's be really clear. Writing and penmanship are two different things. If you want to mess up a kid, and if you want a kid to feel really down and incompetent, try teaching them handwriting too early. They will be completely turned off. Oops, sorry, I can hear my kids in the background. Ignore that. So kids need to know and feel confident and comfortable in what they do. And if you're spending time focused on letter formation, then they're going to lose the meaning of writing. Let kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers work on penmanship. And I know that some will disagree, and I know occupational therapists will disagree with me, but I have seen it. And the research really does show that kids become competent writers when they spend more time practicing letter sounds and putting letter sounds to letter shapes in their writing than if you focus on penmanship first. So skip the penmanship, let other people do that hard work. That's something that kids could focus on in kindergarten. So instead, provide a good visual image. Always model appropriate letter formation. Talk about letter formation, but don't be sitting doing worksheets on letter formation. Don't waste your time on that. Talk about segments and parts of letters. Provide good visual models. Sequence directionality. And talk about what you're writing, most importantly. So it's not a no, it's just focus on what's really important. And the task of writing for purpose is what is important. All right, so learning to form letters continued. Oh gosh, avoid dot-to-dots and word stencils. It's not helpful. They don't teach letter formation. They don't help children distinguish writing from drawing. And worksheets. That becomes tedious, like homework. Like you don't like doing homework. But sometimes you have to do it, but it's tedious and it takes all the fun away. And it sometimes hinders the purpose and meaning of writing. So no dot-to-dots, no worksheets. Don't do it. Not in preschool anyway. Writing should be enjoyable. It should communicate to children that writing is exciting.